Okay, we are live from the B.A.K Playground with Spenser Liszt, who is the founder of Motif Planning. Spenser, you are an incredible human. I want to start with that. That's one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reasons, that I invited you onto the platform today to talk about all of the work you do. I find the work you do to be very selfless. I think you give a lot more than you receive, and I really appreciate that. And I think artists in our community really need to hear from you on the work that you're doing and the services you provide. So thank you for taking time out today to share some energy with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's fun. Last time we talked, I was on the other side of this and you were interviewing me. So this is a fun switcheroo. So to get into a bit of your background, I'm going to give some top line points, but then would love for you to dive in. You created Motif Planning because you realize music professionals are neglected in the financial planning industry. And I really agree. I think almost everyone who's in the playground would agree with you that it's a really messy space, right? There's, for so many reasons, money and music is messy. So I love that you're here and you're going to shed some light for us. So if you can get into your background and let us know who you are and your journey in music.
Sure. So I started my career as a professional musician. I play all the saxophones, clarinet, bass clarinet, and flute. I have a master in jazz studies from North Texas. And I spent most of my time wanting to be a professional musician. And I did that at a very high level. And I was able to make a living strictly performing. Most of my colleagues and people in the space do other work, like teach. I did teach here and there, but eventually I removed all other sources of income and was strictly performing, recording in the studio and things like that. So I was really proud to do that. And it was a little bit of proving people wrong. For those listening, I'm sure you've heard the words, you need a backup plan. You're not going to make a lot of money in music, so on and so on. I heard those same things. And that fueled me a little bit to sort of try to prove them wrong. That's not a good way to pursue your endeavors in life, but it is what I did, and so I was able to do it. But I did come at a crossroads for me personally. My relationship with music changed drastically. I came home from a West Coast tour. I had $67 in my bank. It's kind of like my first financial crisis up until that point. I had savings. I felt like I was doing everything I should be doing financially. And it's sort of a wake-up call, like, oh, I don't actually know that much. So I told myself in that moment, I never want to feel this way again. I was vulnerable. I felt unworthy. There's a lot of feelings around money. And so this was like I spent my whole life working towards mastery of this craft and achieving my goals career-wise. And I don't really have much to show for it. So something was off about it. And so I said, I never want to feel this way again, and no other musician should either. So I started teaching myself financial literacy through podcasts and books, anything I could get my hands on. And I just learned just from free information online, asking people questions, and I started applying those things to my life. And in a relatively short amount of time, my situation drastically changed. My income increased. My mindset around money changed for the better. I started saving for retirement for the first time, and I actually bought my first property, I think 18 months after that moment from that tour. And so it changed my life. It was like, okay, this is information that's useful. It's incredibly impactful. I need to share this with other people. So I started Thriving Musician, which is sort of my parent company, Thriving Musician LLC. Just education, just giving back and telling everyone I can that wants to hear about it. Not every musician wants to hear about it, but trying to advocate for financial literacy and teaching the things that I learned. And over time, that curiosity led me to become a certified financial planner. So I now am an expert and I do it professionally. I've been a financial planner for, I think, 5.5 years, something like that. And I've switched from being a professional musician to a financial planner. And it's amazing. I give a lot of my time for free to educate and do financial literacy and pro bono planning. But then I also do financial planning for people who want holistic, comprehensive advice for all topics: cash flow, insurance, investing, retirement, estate planning, major life purchases, starting a family, literally everything about your finances. I give advice on.
Can you give advice on how to keep husbands happy when you overspend? Because I haven't found any advice there yet, and I really need some.
Yeah, so that is something that I talk about as well. And a lot of my work does sort of border on financial therapy, but there are financial therapists actually. So sometimes it makes sense to work with someone like that. So we could talk about that. There are coaches, planners, therapists. There are a lot of different people out there. And
I
then there's
had
the
no
not
idea
so
there was
good.
a financial therapist. I didn't know
Yeah,
that was a thing.
yeah. A lot of my work kind of borders on that because we do get in most of the financial advice that I give isn't really about the numbers. It's really not about math. It's about emotions. Like, is this keeping you up at night? Okay, well, then let's focus on it. A lot of the decision making that we have is emotional based. And so it does border on therapy, but I am not a licensed therapist, so we don't go that far. But yeah.
So one thing I want to touch on is that you reached a peak, right? You toured and worked with Aretha Franklin, Korn, Frankie Valli, The Temptations, and from the point of view of an artist that's developing, you reached a peak, right? And I think music artists assume that once they reach a peak, that they're financially going to be good. Like I've gotten to this point. I'm working with great artists. I've released music. I'm doing all of the right things. Financially, I should be okay. And what I heard you say is, even though you reached a peak, you weren't okay. You had
Mhm.
$67 in your bank account. Um, what steps do artists need to do, right? I want to kind of transition into, as a developing artist and you're building your career, and money is few and far between, right? $67 was your low point, but I know a lot of artists that function very, day to day with $67 and don't consider it a breaking point. So
Mhm.
what advice would you give to the developing artists or the entrepreneurs, right? We have so many new music entrepreneurs in our community that are going paycheck to paycheck, month to month, fee to fee. What do you need to do when you have $67 or less than that in your bank account? How do you start saving? How do you set yourself up for the future? Like, where does it even begin? Because I've been there.
Mhm.
I'm starting a new business. We're bootstrapping. I'm in the
Mhm.
same place as a lot of the people that are going to resonate with this conversation. So how do we stretch a dollar into savings and life planning?
I have so many thoughts, so I'll try to start from the core essence of what I think is a good place to start. Unfortunately, with money and making changes, in my experience, it takes a trigger of some kind, either super positive or super negative, for us to make a change in our lives. And for many people, that might be rock bottom. And like you said, some people that might be $100,000 in credit card debt. That's a lot of debt, right? And it's a lot of bad debt with high interest. That's a lot lower of a rock bottom than my $67, right? It's different for everybody of what's the threshold before we wake up and say, this is not okay. I want my life to be different. Um, and I say this often is that if we get to that point where we want our lives to be different, you have to realize that your life is not what you want it to be because you are not the person you need to be to live that life. So you actually have to change yourself, whether it's in a small ways or very large ways. And if we can accept that who we are today is not lining up with who we want, what we want our lives to be, then we can be more open to change, which it can be
Mm.
hard to change. So this is a mindset thing. So number one is changing your mindset. And the number one book I recommend for those of you who read books, whether it's audio or physical, is Mindset. It's by Carol Dweck, and she is a professor at Stanford, and she talks about the difference between a an abundance mindset and a scarcity mindset, and why we are all naturally inclined to have a scarcity mindset, which means we think people are either smart or they're dumb. They're either good at this or bad at this. And it's not actually true. You are capable of growth and improving yourself. And the reason that we all naturally lean towards a scarcity mindset is we are told the word no infinitely more times than we're told the word yes as young adults and children. As we're developing our brains, we're getting scarce mindset. It's not on purpose. It's just sort of a natural thing where you're messing with something, you're out in public and your parent or guardian or whoever says no, don't touch that, right? So when we hear no, that's one of many reasons why we have a scarcity mindset. But that was one book for me that really helped change my mindset, is understanding that anything's possible. From there, once you're open to change, you're open to growing as a person, the floodgates open. Then you can start thinking about the actual technical, what do I need to do to change my financial situation? And in most cases, this was the case for me when I was at my financial rock bottom, is you need to increase your income flat out. It's that's usually the pain. Um, that's that's the kickstarter to the pain, basically. So there could be situations where maybe there were decisions made like credit card debt or something like that. You're kind of trying to make up for past maybe financial mistakes or a medical emergency, right? That maybe you didn't have an emergency fund for. So we're either making up for past mistakes or we're just not making enough income to support our lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that's where I would start. And we can go further than that, but that's, I think, the best place to start.
Yeah, and that's hard, right? Right now. Like that's one of the main reasons the playground exists, because people aren't finding opportunities in music to increase their income, and they have to go outside of our industry. When you're dealing with artists in particular that need to bring in more income, are there any gigs or freelance opportunities or things you're like, hey, here's an easier route to making some immediate income? Can you give any
Hmm.
tips there?
Yeah, so this sort of aligns with the mindset of when we are artistic and creative, our identity is attached to that. And it's really hard. I hear this all the time, like, I would never work a 9 to 5 job. That's boring, lame. I don't want to be like that. There's this blockage of something like that, or they don't want to do something music adjacent. Like help, I helped an orchestra with marketing for many years
Mm.
as a side gig. And I actually was in the orchestra when I was younger, but when I moved on from that, I came back and helped them. I had another skill. So a few things I would say is we have to understand that our identity is really only something that we think about.
Mm.
Everyone outside of you in your world is not judging you on your identity, whether you are purely an artist or not. They only want to support you and they want to hear about what you're up to. And oh, you're doing this too, cool, you're this person now, cool. It's only internal, in my experience, of this conflict that we have of wanting to preserve our artistic identity. So that's one thing to consider. That's a mindset thing. Another thing I would say is that as artists, we have so many more skills than your average person, and they go far beyond artistic and creative skills. For me, I'm a professional improviser. I'm a professional listener. I
Mm.
mean, these are skills that a lot of people don't have, and you can go into any work environment and provide a lot of value, which is the way we earn income, is by providing value in some way.
Mm.
You could basically do anything you want. I've known musicians who have either started sort of side income or completely changed careers, but they kind of kept their artistry separate from money. That's a decision to make. Whether you need to make money from it? Does it need to be your main source of income, or do you just want it to be an artistic outlet? Something to think about. But I've known people who are world-class musicians who go on to become data scientists. They still have both in their lives and they're super fulfilled.
Mm.
So there are a lot of different things like that to consider of, is this something I really want to do full time? This is the only thing I want to do. If, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that is the case, then we have to think about what are the options. We have to ask other people who are doing the same thing you're doing. How are you generating income? What did you have to do to get to that point? Did you do any training to be able to get to that point? We need more transparency around what that looks like. So I would say the first thing to do, if it is something you want to do full time, you don't want to do any other kind of work, then you need to find other people doing what you're doing. You need that role model. You need a case study that you can say, I can do this too, just in my own way. You need to talk to those people and see. So the other thing I would say is if you're open to generating income however you need to support your lifestyle, to earn, to generate more capital so that you can then switch to doing full-time artistry, you need money, right? So we need to build up. Give yourself grace, give yourself time. It's okay if you wait 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. Some people wait 30 years before starting an artist career because they want to set themselves up for either their career that they want to do, or they want to set themselves up for other things in life they want to do. Maybe they want to travel, have children, start a family, buy a house. There's a lot of questions we have to ask ourselves before we can kind of say, what do we need to do next? But I know I threw a lot of things out there, but I think in the end, I strongly believe that I'll go back to the skills. You have a lot of different skills. They're super marketable, whether it's in music or it's not. That's up to you to decide, and it depends on your mindset on if you're willing to do what you're willing to do.
That's some really good advice. And what I love about where our industry is going and the current is taking us is that not only are artists trying to remain independent, but so are professionals, right? And whether that was forced from the layoffs or it's a mindset where people want to be an entrepreneur instead of a 9 to 5. One thing that people are struggling with, though, is how to be an entrepreneur, how to stay independent as a professional. So I do a lot of work with the professionals in the playground on what should your fees be, what should your packages be, how do you market the services that you're providing, how do you reach out, how do you say, hey artists, I noticed that you need this, but their budget is very low, how do you work with them? When someone, my question for you is, when someone is starting their own entrepreneurial independent journey as a professional, what I heard you say is it's okay to wait 12 months. It's okay to wait 2 years to be an artist. But as an independent, when you're kind of forced into being an entrepreneur, what are the things that you need to do in the very beginning of your entrepreneurial journey that are going to set you up for success? Do you have to have a savings account and a certain type of bank? This is not my lane. I'm good at making money and I'm good at spending money, and all of this in between is not, I'm not good at it. Leroy is the financial responsible one between the two of us. So I'm not going to have much to say here. I'm going to let you give the advice, but my question is, how do you remain financially responsible in the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so let's say in the scenario, like we've already started the business, because what I would advise people who are thinking about doing it is you haven't started it yet, so you can think about how you want to start it. Like right before we click go, what can we do beforehand? We want to save a lot, have cash flow available for the ups and downs. See what your living expenses are. How much runway do you want to give yourself where you don't have to worry about, you don't have to scrape and scrounge for work. So that's before you pull the trigger. Let's say we've done it, either we're laid off or we've started the business. I think the first thing to do is you have to understand everything about your financial situation. So what is coming in, what's going out? So what are your living expenses? So it's there's the business and then the personal. We want to know both. What do we kind of expect starting out? Like maybe we have some clients right when we start that's why we started, because we felt like, oh, we've got some work that we can start with. What does that look like? What are the expenses of the business? And then same for personal. What are your basic baseline living expenses? What's above that that's more discretionary that you could have some more wiggle room? So an example of discretionary might be like dining out versus getting groceries. A non-discretionary expense would be like rent or a mortgage payment or an insurance premium, things that are happening every month. It's the same amount. You don't have a choice. There's no flexibility there other than moving or, to a lower cost living area or something like that. That's a major life change though. So it'd be things that like, can you change? Like, what are your baseline living expenses? And what sacrifices are you willing to make? We talked about this on our episode. What sacrifices are you willing to make for long-term gain? And delayed gratification is, the key here. Are you willing to do X now so that you can have Y later or Z? And so I think the first step is knowing what's coming in, what's going out. Be conservative, especially with the business. What's the worst possible situation? Okay, then that means that we need to, find X amount of clients or do some side work, right? So that information will then guide all of your future decisions. So I say that the more information you can gather now, you'll be able to make sound financial decisions because you have all the information. If we don't have as much information as possible, then we're sort of just throwing darts at the wall, but the lights are off.
So start with a budget. Start with knowing what your expenses are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Trim down the fat. Make sure that you have your bare minimum. My son has joined the podcast.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Can you get out of my podcast, child?
Karen,
we're gonna cut this out of the recap. So sorry.
Okay.
You are having a child,
Yeah.
right? You're about to be a parent. So welcome to the chaos of being a parent. I don't know how to trim the fat when it comes to kids. I'll be honest. Right? That's one of the things I'd say if you are starting your entrepreneurial journey. If you're going to have a kid, that's going to really throw a wrench in it. I got pregnant at the very start of my entrepreneurial journey. Well, not the very start. I was like 2013. I started 4 years in, and I had just really started taking off as a publicist, and life happened. Life really, really happened very quickly. And then I had my daughter, and then I had my son almost back to back. And it was really hard. And a lot of people I know now, right? Because I'm in like a moms and music group. I'm in two of them, and it's really hard to balance life with working in music in this current state. So in the last 5 minutes that we have or so, what are some tips that you have, right, for the people listening that are parents that have to take care of their parents, that are taking care of family, that like maybe they're taking care of themselves and they have some really heavy stuff that they're dealing with. Like I'm sure you come across this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get through it, right? What are the tips to get through it?
Yeah, so a lot of the content I see around artists is sort of encouraging like the horse blinder mentality of like focus on your business and your art. But the reality of life is these things are happening, right? There is no one who, I mean, I guess unless you're just completely isolated, you have no family, no friends, you're just in your basement making music or whatever it is, and you have no communication with anyone in the outside world. Maybe that's possible, but that's typically not the reality. And so we have to incorporate life into this. And the advice I would give is to take some time to review and reflect on your values artistically, but more importantly, personally. And so that might be just some examples. Be kind would be a value. Protect my family. That could be a value. One of mine is to provide wisdom to others. That is one of my core values. Is if I'm providing wisdom to others, I feel fulfilled in my life. Whether I make money or not is irrelevant, right? Because I'm doing that value. And when you know what your values are, all of your decision making becomes clear. Because if you are doing your career, but then you have a family, and one of your values is to support my family however possible, whatever you want to say for your own values, then there's no conflict. The conflict goes away because you understand that these are my values, and there's always going to be a pecking order of what's important to you, and then your decisions can follow that. And with any financial decision or any life decision, there is always trade-offs. I think we talked about this in our episode 2. You can theoretically have anything in this world. You cannot have everything. And so your values will are the guideposts to show you what's most important to you, and everything will fall in line. And that goes back to budgeting or a spending plan or whatever you want to call it, cash flow plan. I do the same thing. Is your spending aligned with your values? You might say to me, we're just spending so much on soccer practice and it's just so expensive, right? But if one of your values is you want your children to, uh, you know, be enriched by a variety of activities or something like that. To me, it's like, well, who cares, what it costs? That's one of your core values. Keep it, do it, keep doing it. What are some other things that are not in alignment with your values that you just might not realize? And an example might be, oh, yeah, um, maybe you're not that into fine dining or something, and it's like, oh, well, you went to this steakhouse. Like, if you look back and think about that moment you were at dinner, how do you feel? And you might say, it was kind of whatever. Like, I would have rather just been home with my kids and make them something or whatever. And it's like that's where things start to percolate. Like, what bubbles up those feelings, and then it's like, oh, okay, I just never really thought about like the way that I'm spending. I wasn't really an active participant in that decision. It was a passive one. And so knowing your values allows you to then make more active decisions that are aligned with what you want in your life.
I find that very difficult when, like, my family, right, loves to go out to eat. Love, like, my mom, anytime I see my mom, the first thing she asks is, when are we going to eat? And I love to cook. Like, my family, I cook. We already cook. We are home. We cook. We eat around the dinner table every single day. So we don't spend a lot of money, and it's hard to get my mom to, like, sit down and have a meal at home. She lives by herself. She's used to going out.
Mm.
So, and I use it as an example of, especially for music artists or professionals, like learning how to say no to friends, or colleagues, because in our industry, when I was working at Universal, we're out all the time. Like, let's go get drinks. Let's go to the show. Let's go out. Let's spend extra money on glam for this video shoot instead of doing makeup myself. There's so many triggers to spend money. Spend. And it's very difficult to keep money or to make money in music. So I think your advice to really trim the fat and be particular on what provides value into your life versus maybe what is superficial, really needs to be removed when you're going through a financial time. That you have to be smart. You have to be sensible. So I love that both in our previous conversation and this one that's resurfaced, that short-term sacrifice will lead to long-term stability. And I personally am learning that. And it's not an easy thing to do when you're very used to having a full-time job and
Hmm.
making a lot of money, or you came off tour and you have all this money coming in, and you're in this lull, right? Because entrepreneurship, independence will put you in a lull at some point. You're going to have high highs, hopefully, but you're going to have probably low lows more often than you care for. Learning how to trim the fat and being smart during that downtime is a mindset. It's so important. It's going to keep you financially stable, and I think you get mentally stronger, right? And you realize, like, oh, as I continue down the road of this life, I actually don't need to spend all this money. Even if I have it, I'm still not going to spend it. I'd rather put that towards savings, and
Hmm.
you start rethinking how you're spending money and learning how to say no when you really need to say no. So I love that.
Yeah, learning all these things is super empowering. I think that's what you'll find. It might take some time, but man, my life is so much different. even though I help people with money, I'm not thinking about my money hardly at all. It's not keeping me up at night. It's a whole different world, and it can be yours too.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Spencer. I really appreciate it. We have a couple more minutes. Tell us how artists can connect with you. Like if I'm an independent artist or I'm starting my music entrepreneurial journey and I pick up the phone, I'm like, I want to connect with Spencer. How should people connect with you? Should they connect with you if they have money that they need to learn how to plan? Should they connect with you when they don't have any money and they're thinking about this? Where's the starting point for you?
Yeah, so I have different things you can engage with based on your situation. So hopefully I can help no matter what your situation is. So the first one is Motif Planning, motifplanning.com. That's my comprehensive financial planning. Typically, this is for people who are a little bit further along in life. They might have either single or dual income, and you want a comprehensive financial plan. And I work with a lot of people in their 30s and 40s. And I don't have an asset minimum. I don't even take custody of assets in your investments. I just show you how to do them. So technically, I'm just a flat fee, and that's all you pay. And so it's, it costs what it costs. So that may or may not make sense for you at the moment. But you can look at the website and see if it does and reach out. The other things that I have are completely free, and that's my financial literacy and education. And so that is my podcast, the Thriving Musician Podcast. I have a blog. So I've actually consolidated everything. It's all on motifplanning.com. But if you click education, there's the blog. You can sign up for the newsletter. And the podcast episodes are also blog posts. So they're kind of all together. And then I do speaking engagements. So I speak at conferences and universities and do panels, and eventually there might be more resources and materials coming up, but I make tools. So if you want to track your cash flow or see what your net worth is or want to know how to build a savings emergency fund, I built tools to show you step by step how to do that. It's all for free.
Amazing. That's
And then
amazing. Thank you for building that and thank you for being an incredible resource for our industry.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And where can people find you on social media?
At Spenser Liszt, SPENSERLISZT. And the last thing is I do pro bono planning, completely free, 1 hour a week. It's on the website. You click pro bono, and that's for people facing financial hardship. And so I can actually legally give you financial advice if you're facing financial hardship. So sign up for those. They're completely free.
That is awesome. And the people in the playground really need to know about it. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Spencer, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll
You
talk to you.
too. Okay,
Bye.
bye.